Welcome back to the show. I changed the name. It just, you know what, the dorm thing is like, eventually I realized I'm going to graduate from college, and then what? I can't be the dorm next door. I might not even live in a dorm next year. So, like, it'd be weird. I mean, it was cool while it lasted. People asked me questions about why I changed the name, but I just changed the name because I felt like it needed to be something that was more timeless. And I think my name is timeless because it exists so as long as I am alive, if that makes sense. But yeah, people were asking me questions. They were wondering why. But I want to say this. I know it's been a long time. I want to make sure that the quality of an episode that I would release would be the best that it could possibly be. I'm not going to release an opinion about, say, the Iran war, internal politics in the United States without actually knowing what I believe on the subject myself. And so I've spent every single day over the last almost month that this war has been going on. It's been going on for over 4 weeks now, just wondering what I believed about the thing. And my beliefs have remained relatively consistent. But I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody that is new, that is going to be listening to this podcast for the first time. And I expect that number to be very high, as my viewership has now just across all platforms reached to 2.5 million views per month. And I'm so thankful that you all decided to watch this video, like the video. So many of you shared the video. I now have hundreds of thousands of people that have liked my videos. And I've had fights with TikTok over my videos. I've had fights with Instagram and TikTok without them saying that they were fighting with me over my videos, with shadow bans and such. And you know what? I feel honored to be shadow banned and have my own videos taken down off of the internet. I feel like it is an honor to have something that is considered to be violent misinformation, and then I fight the thing, and it turns out that it's not violent misinformation. So I have had both of my videos restored. So, me too. TikTok, 0. It's been a very, very fun last month. But the show, making this, is way more fun. I just hope that people will watch it, because the transaction between getting 1 million views on a reel or a TikTok and translating that into an actual long-form episode of a podcast is a whole different beast. Okay, building an audience for a podcast is one of the hardest things to do, but I'm so thankful, and I'm hoping that you are joining this and that you will join back again when I get to make another episode. There are fun ones coming soon. Some guests that I'm thinking about having on, that I am going to be having on, most likely. I think that they will be a nice change in temperature, change in conversation. But anyways, the title of this episode, The Iran War is Not Going Well. If you think that it is, I would like you to check your sources. Who are you receiving news from? Is it your usual appetite? Is it your usual diet of Fox News? Is it Newsmax? I'm not expecting Greg Kelly from Newsmax to tell you the truth. I think that's what his name is. I don't think you should expect the people at Fox or wherever else to be honest with this about you. In fact, historically, they have not. I remember Fox News, so I don't remember, but Fox News during the Iraq War was the exact same way. They endorsed it. They were supposed to have a certain ratio between people that were for the Iraq War and people that were against it. I think it was like for every 3 or 4 anchors, maybe even more anchors that were for the war, you were supposed to have one that was against it, and they didn't do it. Nobody on Fox News right now is against the war in Iran. And it is a very weird thing to see, but they are not. Now, I know war benefits many industries in the United States of America. We just thought about boosting the defense budget to $1.5 trillion a year, which would require cuts to farmers, things that the United States Americans benefit from. There's no real benefit unless you go and work for Lockheed Martin or one of these companies. There's no real benefit for us to constantly be at war. That's what you should expect when you have a $1.5 trillion defense budget. I mean, what else is it for? If the missiles sit stagnant, they have a shelf life. You will not be able to fire that thing past a certain period of time. So what are we expecting out of this? I know war does benefit the economy. It brought the United States of America out of the Great Depression during World War II, but this is a different America today. We have forked out 10x times the amount of money to Iran just by buying the oil, since they have this hold on the Strait of Hormuz. Then they got, when we gave them sanctions relief during the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action back in 2015 when Obama signed the Iran nuclear deal. Right? They are benefiting from Iran is benefiting from this war financially, more so than they did when we simply had a deal with them about the nuclear weapon. They did push it a little bit. They did. But just going forward, this war is not what you think it is. It's not sunshine and rainbows. This isn't Iraq. Saddam had given up on his own country by that point. This isn't Venezuela. We took out the president and we leave the country be. This isn't Libya where Gaddafi gets ousted. Well, not even ousted. Well, Gaddafi gets unalived. I can't even say the other word. I have to say unalive now online. It's so weird. I thought it was like a way that liberals were trying to be like, censor themselves from saying. I can't say that. It's such a weird America. Anyways, it's not the same. Iran is a country with 93 million people with vast control over the Middle East. They are the superpower in the Middle East. So as long as they are able to survive this war, which they probably will, they have control over most of the world's oil supply geographically because they've been able to shut it down. We can't get it open, which is why we are panicking. So it's been an absolute disaster. You have a country of 93 million people. Overthrowing the country isn't as easy as you might think, especially when you have a country where, at the very least, right, we'll say, all right, let's throw a number out there. I've heard many, many different numbers. I've seen 80% of people in Iran want a regime change, okay? Let's go with the 80. That's a very, very generous number coming out of, I don't even think that number came out of Iran. But that's the generous number that people in the United States that endorse the war are saying, hey, 80% of the people in Iran want a regime change. You still have 20% that don't. And that 20% are militant Muslims that obey the Quran. When you're a Shia Muslim, it actually means that you are obeying what the Quran says. I know there's debate between Sunni and Shia. The main debate is who was the successor to Muhammad. But let's just say it. Shia Muslims do what the Quran says, and they are a lot more religious and militant than the rest of Islam. And they watched as their Ayatollah got unalived on the first day of the war because he was standing on the corner of a street with his family, right? He wasn't hiding. And so he was gone after the first day of the war. And so what happens as a result of that? You fire up the entire rest of the country because that is the biggest honor in Islam. It is to be a martyr. And you made a martyr out of the leader of their country in the first day during Ramadan, which is literally like Easter for Christians. It was so now when you think about putting boots on the ground in this situation, what are you going to have? You're going to go up against these millions of people that hate you, and they're going to fight. I remember Mark Levin last night on Fox News did a segment where he was talking about all the casualties from all the battles that the United States has been involved in during World War II, okay? And one of the things that he said, which was super interesting, was he talked about the fact that dropping a nuclear weapon saves lives. Watch this clip.
The Battle of Okinawa, 50,000 plus casualties, over 12,000, nearly 13,000 killed on that island, which is what convinced Truman that we would lose a million men if we didn't drop the atomic bombs that we did.
It's just super interesting. It's like, so he decided to drop a nuclear weapon because it was thought that the invasion of Japan would cost 1 million lives. So you know what he's really saying? Let's be honest. This guy right now is closer to the president of the United States than probably J.D. Vance. Right? The worst possible people you could imagine are the closest people to the president. Because how do you get close to the president? Like Paula White has? Like Mark Levin has? Like Jared Kushner has? I'm not as sure about Jared Kushner, but Paula White literally compares Donald Trump to Jesus. So what kind of effect do you think it has on somebody like him? You're going to love it. He's talked about it before, how he wants to be surrounded by yes men. So that's what you do. That's how you infiltrate the White House. That's how you have Lindsey Graham being able to go to Israel to help convince or coach Benjamin Netanyahu on how to convince Trump to go to war with Iran and him not get in trouble for it. All you have to do to get your job in the White House, to get close to the president and keep your job, is you tell the president what he wants to hear. First term, people got fired. I'm talking about President Trump's first term when he was 45. That was kind of the term where he still had people around him that weren't going to tell him everything that he wanted to hear. And now, this time around, he's surrounded by yes men, and it's been nothing but a disaster. You have Pete Hegseth dehumanizing people in Iran, which is no good. Obviously, it's no good because we're messing around with war crimes here. And I just want you to know this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. If we're still in the year 2026 and we think that this is an issue between Republicans and Democrats, or we're going to blame Democrats, or we're going to blame Republicans, then you have no optics for this entire situation, for how the entirety of the United States of America is going at this point. We are at the point where we know what the top 1% is doing and what they think of us. We saw enough Epstein files to know what we are up against. And so the idea that this is just Democrats versus Republicans, you're going to get the exact same thing. If I hear a Democrat complaining against Trump right now, I might agree with them on some things, but I don't agree with them in their reasoning behind what they believe, because they hate Trump in the first place. So their position is more emotional rather than practical or just focusing on outcomes, right? Because they hate Trump from the get-go. So they're like, well, finally, you guys joined our team. No, but we just want you to realize it's beyond this. It's beyond red or blue. Now, by the time you see change in the United States of America, we'll have to flesh out the details. But right now, we need to be on the same team here and fight for change, right? But liberals say, oh, Kamala would have been so much better. But mean tweets, right? But she laughs, but she has a weird laugh, right? The war with Iran literally would have happened if she was the president of the United States, probably in June of 2025, when Trump just attacked them the first time. She would have folded under no pressure at all. At least we know that Trump did not want to go to war with Iran. There were a million things that happened behind the scenes that forced him to do so. It has been a very interesting last 48 hours. We just got a message or an announcement of Truth Social from President Trump on Easter. We got a little nice praise be to Allah out of it. And he basically said Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day. So that is going to be the exact day of this release. And I'm recording this the day before, which is something that I was kind of reluctant to do, but I didn't have a choice. And Bridge Day all wrapped up into one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the effing straight, you crazy bastards. I'm just going to say it. Or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah, President Donald J. Trump. I don't know if an intern typed that or he typed it on his phone, but that is, I don't think most of us realize, words cannot describe how crazy that is. But let me tell you, what I'm thinking is going to happen, and the decision may be already made by the time this episode releases. I'm going to tell you my prediction 24 hours ahead of time. He's not going to do it. He is going to come out here. Either he is going to extend the deadline, but what I'm predicting most likely is he's going to say that Iran wants a ceasefire and we're talking right now and there's going to be a deal and they want to talk and we're talking and the talking is going great. That's what I'm expecting to hear. The talking is really good. That's the best that I got. But I'm expecting that we are not going to see this happen, and we better pray to God. As a Christian, you better pray that this does not happen, because it is a war crime. Let's not water it down. When you attack civilian infrastructure, you are committing a war crime. So he will be under an international investigation, and it's a mess that the United States doesn't want. But I'm just saying, I mean, the UN is like going to send us a strongly worded email or something. They're going to threaten to monitor the situation more closely. That's just who they are. But it's still a problem, because wrong is wrong and right is right. It's not because like these people didn't do anything. It's one thing to take out a military base, a weapons stockpile, a ship. But it's another thing to attack basically the Golden Gate Bridge of Iran, and that's what just got hit yesterday or 2 days ago from now. It is absolutely horrifying, and it's scary, because this sets a bad precedence for the rest of warfare. Because if we don't play nice, how do you expect the rest of the world to react when they might inevitably get pulled into this conflict? And Trump could literally easily play dirty and end the world and end the war, but it would cause the Iranian population to completely collapse on himself, meaning that people would literally have to fight over things like food and water, and they wouldn't have access to electricity. Imagine 93 million people in Iran not having access to electricity. That's what he says, and when so many other people say they want to send Iran back to the Stone Ages, like the psychopath Laura Loomer, who has been advocating on Twitter, or X, sorry, for American attacks on things like water, on things like electricity, on all those things herself. It's completely wrong, and it is absolutely wicked, and we do not deserve people like that in our country. We shouldn't want a Laura Loomer or a Mark Levin in the United States of America. I'm sorry. We need to look out for our country and look at and see those who have dual loyalty, at the very least, to another country. And this is the cost. The cost is American lives, right? I have a friend who's one of the young men who has already passed away in this conflict, who has already died, is from his hometown. And it'll only get worse from there. Boots on the ground doesn't mean a dozen Americans are going to pass away, as awful as it is. It means that thousands inevitably will die, because Iran is mountainous. Iran is geographically very complicated. It's a huge country. There's millions of people that will take out an American if they see them. We are playing with something that could last years. Originally, the conflict was supposed to go maybe 1 or 2 weeks. They thought it was going to be very quick. And now they're saying, well, could go for months. This is just what we're getting ourselves into. But the biggest worry for the United States is that we will completely isolate ourselves from the rest of the world, which we cannot do. If we rip ourselves out of the Middle East like a Band-Aid, which would inevitably happen when you pull out of this war, because you realize that Iran still has the ability to go after all the United States military bases in the region. They still could take out a United States military base in the Gulf and threaten to do so. And if the United States knows it needs to make peace for the world economy to survive, they have no choice but to pull out of the Middle East entirely. But we can't, because we are dependent on something called the petrodollar. Professor Zhang, if you haven't watched his lectures, I highly recommend that you do so. Take everything with a grain of salt, though, as you do all things, right? Don't just immediately believe him, but he explains this really well. He might get some things wrong. I mean, I can't think of anything particularly off the top of my head right now, but he gets a lot of things completely correct when he explains that the United States is dependent on its deals with the GCC. And the GCC are countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council, countries like Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. They purchase United States oil using the petrodollar. They are neutral countries that are vital to United States trade. So the United States makes a lot of money off of them. But if they don't have oil, because these countries are importers, right? Qatar is reliant. 99% of that country's water comes from desalination plants, right? These countries they don't have any resources themselves. So they are completely dependent on trade in other countries. So we make a lot of money off of trading oil in the petrodollar. And so when you remove that, the United States economy could go into an immediate free fall, because you inevitably are going to push the GCC to have to trade for their own survival with countries like Russia or China, or join or start to side with Iran, because right now they are neutral. And even after Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, they apologized, because Iran is more strategic to think long term, which is what the United States cannot do, does not do. And they're thinking, well, maybe we can eventually have them as an ally if we are going to continue to push countries away from us, which is literally what we are doing. The strategic hold that Iran has over the Strait of Hormuz, and technically the entire world at this point, because the entire world to some extent is dependent on it, albeit some countries have different levels of dependency on it, but you have China that's 50% dependent on it, or 45% dependent on it. The United States is a lot less, but we still are, for some reason, to some extent dependent on it. If we weren't dependent on it, gas wouldn't have gotten any more expensive, and it is. The rest of the world may be drawn into a conflict like this, because listen, the entire world runs based off of whether or not they have access to cheap energy. And if the world does not, then the world's economy takes a major hit, because it simply cannot function. Asian countries like India, Myanmar, and Indonesia are now implementing fuel rationing. And Europe is considering doing the same thing as they release their strategic reserves. So long term, right, we are probably one of the best off countries right now. But long term, the United States takes a major hit as well. gas can and will get more expensive. Do you remember the oil embargo in the 1970s under Richard Nixon? You had to go and get gas on your selected days, on odd or even numbered days, depending on, I'm pretty sure it was your license plate. This is how bad it can get. And that is something that costed elections. I mean, Gerald Ford did not win. Nixon was gone, but it was for different reasons. But I'm saying you don't win elections based off of this. And Republicans cannot expect at this point to win an election in the midterms. They're just not going to. We could see the point, or we could see this get to a point where Democrats maybe get 2/3. But one thing is for certain, when you have something like that, the government actually does have some real stability. In the 1990s, around 1994 and up until the year 2000, there was a really great point of United States economic stability because you had Bill Clinton, who was, more of a fiscally conservative, kind of like, he was literally kind of like Trump in his policy. He was that kind of a Democrat that was popular in the South. You had him with somebody like Newt Gingrich, where they had this Republican revolution in 1994 where they won massive majority. I'm pretty sure they got a supermajority in the House, right? And so you basically had a point of stability because you knew nothing crazy was going to happen. So people realized that, okay, the economy is how it is. The laws are how they are. So we're just going to expect them to be stable for this, at least until the next election comes around. So that is actually one plus in Democrats winning, is you will at least see a more stable market. And I think that's interesting because usually if you're a Republican, you want all Republicans to be in power. I would understand that. If you're a Democrat, I would understand why you want your party to be in charge of everything. But there is an actual real benefit when you have bipartisan cooperation, which becomes a necessity at that point. Because you have to have cooperation. You have to have a president that cooperates with Congress to pass spending bills. So that is a positive, I will say. But still, long-term, our economy could be very hurt by this war if it goes to be several years. I'm not saying it will. I pray to God it won't. The United States of America is trying to find an off-ramp to this war right now. It can't, but it could go for a long while. If it goes into boots in the ground, you will see a country that is in the same situation as it was when we were in Afghanistan, Iraq, and lest I say Vietnam. Fuel rationing could occur in the United States as it has before, as I explained. But we can't just take oil from Venezuela, right? We can't just do that. Now, steps can be taken in order to begin to use that oil, but that oil is so thick to the point where it's a step down from actual asphalt in its own, so it's not that simple, right? The United States of America, if we played our cards right, North America could be a completely self-sufficient continent. But we're not making steps to make that a possibility. I don't see the United States of America becoming friends or trying to work with countries like Brazil or Argentina. I see us cooperating with Israel in the Middle East, which is not helping us economically. I see us pushing away our allies in the Western Hemisphere. And so that is just not something that's good. But one thing I wanted to point out real quick. I know I'm going to be referring to birthright citizenship right now, but it does have deeper ramifications and there are more connections and it goes a lot deeper than what you might think on the surface level. And so Donald J. Trump posted on Truth Social yesterday that it's too bad that the Supreme Court can't watch and study the Mark Levin show tonight on the birthright citizenship scam. If they saw it, they would never allow that money-making hoax to continue. They should use their powers of common sense for the good of our country. They failed miserably on tariffs, needlessly costing the USA hundreds of billions in potential rebates for the benefit haters and scammers. So he had a little grammatical error there. Why? Don't do it again. The country can only withstand so many bad decisions from a court that just doesn't seem to care. Now, 3 of those justices he appointed. So, you put him in that position. Do not insult. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, okay? Roe v. Wade was considered a major Trump victory because of the justices that he put on the Supreme Court, right? And so if you have this connection between the Supreme Court and you want to foster that relationship. You don't just insult the Supreme Court. But that's not the point. I'm getting into the weeds here. So he just brought up the fact that we should all watch the Mark Levin show. The President of the United States connection with Mark Levin over the last year, since his second term took place, should scare everybody. It's very alarming because Mark Levin has a closer connection to the United States president than many of his own advisors, maybe even family members, because he is a yes man, but he's advocating constantly for this war for Iran because he himself has skin in the game for Israel. Okay, he is Jewish, right? There's the unseverable connection between him and Israel. So of course he's going to want to go to war with Iran because who stands to benefit the most from this? Israel does, quite literally. They'll be able to expand as far as they think they are entitled to, which is Egypt to the modern day Euphrates. Even though the Euphrates has changed over time, it would be the modern day Euphrates River, which they expand to. And this war opens up that to be the possibility. So Mark Levin, take all the opinions of Mark Levin. He said some nasty stuff. He's full of hate, right? But you take him and his opinions, and you just take the reality of it. Him with all those opinions is directly influencing the United States president. And I think that's horrifying. If Trump is telling everybody to watch the Mark Levin show because he is the representative of President Trump right now, he is the representative of MAGA, then you just watch the Mark Levin show for yourself and you see how bad it really is, how bad it could get if he continues to listen to somebody like this warmonger that has wanted to go to war with Iran for years. That screams at the microphone every time you watch him on Fox News. I used to be a huge fan. I used to be a huge Mark Levin fan a couple years ago. But even my mom would be like, why are we watching this guy? Why? He's so angry. And she was right. Somebody with that temperament, somebody with that blatant hatred towards the United States of America influencing our foreign policy is a recipe for absolute disaster. He literally lobbied to use a nuclear weapon. He's lobbying right now to use a nuclear weapon. And if he has that kind of access and influence to the President of the United States, then let's just say there's a higher possibility of a nuke being dropped on Iran than there was 6 months ago, a year ago. It becomes a lot stronger of a possibility when he is the influence. And I think that's quite scary. But just jumping to another aspect, I mentioned this already, but the United States of America is making a major mistake with the way that we are treating NATO. I know it's unfair if we pay into NATO for that certain extent, and I would agree with Trump on that. Okay, every country should pay their fair share, right? But at the same time, why are we going to push them to the point of hating us? So you've got this. I'm going to read this, another Truth Social post from President Trump. He said, the failing New York Times, whose lack of credibility and their constant fake news attacks on your favorite president, me, has caused its circulation to absolutely plummet. Referred to our severely weakened and extremely unreliable partner NATO as the North American Treaty Organization. The correct name is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. A very interesting mistake. The hiring and educational standards have gone way down at the New York Times. That's kind of funny. Bring back all the news that's fit to print and make America great again. President DJT. These attacks on NATO are a bad idea because at the same time, it's like we're trying to gaslight them into. Oh wait, I didn't think it just shut off. It's still going. So it's like we're trying to gaslight them into joining in the war, and that's not what you want your legacy to be. If you're the president of the United States, you don't want it to be pushing away your allies, your real allies, like our oldest ally, France, pushing away the UK, Canada, and Germany, who are all members of NATO. They're not our enemies. We shouldn't act like they are. The sad reality is that the reason we are calling for NATO to open the Strait of Hormuz, which is something that Trump has just recently called for, saying, you need it more than we do, so you guys go open the Strait. We don't need it. We'll sell you oil. We don't need the Strait at all. The reason why we're doing this is because we quite literally can't do it ourselves. We are trying to play this off as a win, but we would have toppled the regime already if we could. We tried to at the very beginning. Why are we still even here. Well, what we do know is that right before the war, Netanyahu quite literally told Trump, well, we're attacking anyways. And all the U.S. assets that you have in the Gulf, well, they're going to be at major risk when this war starts. And so you even had Marco Rubio, who right when the war had this little slip, might have been a Freudian slip where this is what he actually believes. But he said, we preemptively attacked Iran because Israel was going to attack anyways. I want you to watch this clip and see what you think.
Stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
So they forced our hand again. And just like 2003 in Iraq, when they said that they were weapons of mass destruction, they lied to us again. It's just not true. Iran was not really in pursuit of a nuclear weapon. You know why? Because the United States intelligence would have known immediately. Now, they had 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, which can be enriched to 90% in a week. But we're talking about entire nations going to war here. You don't just do this off of a feeling. Like you feel like they're going to be doing something. Well, if you were going to attack Iran, then you would have done it in 2003 when they had an actual nuclear weapons program. Since 1968, they have had an international right to a nuclear program, not nuclear weapons program. You get the two confused, okay? Nuclear program is being championed as the big reason why Iran is a major threat to the United States of America, which it wasn't and still isn't, and Israel, which it more so was, right? But the reason why they're saying nuclear program is they're acting as if there's no difference. There is a difference. Iran has not had a nuclear weapons program since 2003. Now, it is sketchy when you have 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, right? It is. But let's talk about the fact that we don't just make decisions like that based off of a feeling that they could enrich or the possibility that they could. Because we're in the situation right now. And is it going well? Absolutely not. Iran has been preparing for this war for 20 years. And now we're at a point where Israel can't keep this up either. They are struggling as well. And so Israel's not doing quite as well as they would have thought because of this. They're not doing quite good. And in fact, new charts suggest that they are running out of ammunition, with Iran only having depleted 1/3 of their missile stockpiles. They're not winning the PR battle in their own country as well. Something that's not really widely known is, obviously, we know that from what Charlie Kirk said right before he died, that, well, Israel has been on the brink of civil war because people were protesting the regime that is in power right now, being Netanyahu. But actually, record numbers of people are leaving Israel, with 150,000 people leaving over 2024 and 2025, and the net loss of population being 120,000 people. So people don't want to live. They don't feel safe. They don't agree with the politics, especially those that are more secular. So what are you left with? Well, you're left with the ultra-Orthodox Jews that stay in Iran. But the problem is you cannot conscript them. They don't fight in the wars. And so now you're having a problem with having enough soldiers to fight, right? Israel's dipping into their reserves, right? They require people to serve, right? And so they're having to reuse the same people over and over again, and they're getting older. So what are they going to have to do if they want to have a sufficient number of troops to fight their wars in southern Lebanon, which they're being halted from advancing, right? They've gotten to southern Lebanon where they plan to destroy all the homes, which is just really awful because some of the oldest Christian communities in the entire world are the ones that are paying the price for this, but they've been prevented from advancing any further. There's a very real restraint, or there's a very real limit to what Israel can do, right? And so if Netanyahu tried to force conscription among the ultra-Orthodox, well, he would lose his coalition and he would lose power, so he's not going to do that. So Israel has to make do with what they can, which is why they are so dependent on the United States of America. And it could be why they're trying to develop a relationship with India. It would make sense because India has 1.4 plus billion people. They are now the most populated country in the world. So they are reliant on everybody else around them to help them fight their wars, which is not fair to you or I. The American taxpayer, which Israel makes $50 million worth of interest off of, just off of the loan that we give them in military aid, right? They buy United States Treasury loans. So Israel is on their back foot here. And it's not being reported correctly, but a lot of Iran's missiles are getting through the Iron Dome. And we've gotten to the point where Israel is quite literally rationing their missiles. So they can't fight this war forever. But their goals are completely contradictory to the United States of America. The U.S. goal, right, even though it's not been clear, right, because you know what? You can't lose a war if you don't have a goal. Don Zhu. Israel literally said, Netanyahu literally said after President Trump was trying to end the war, Netanyahu was like, yeah, that's great, but like we're going to make sure that we continue to move forward for our own objectives, which they need the United States to help fight this war as well. Because if you're running out of missiles, you're having to ration your missiles, your people are dying, right? Back at home, your people are dying. But he literally said, well, we're going to continue to fight this war until our objectives. And he didn't really list his objectives. He didn't really say, what we want, but it is clear what they want. They want to expand their borders. It's called the Greater Israel Project. I'm pretty sure I actually brought this up in the last episode, but that is the goal, even if it's not talked about, right? Netanyahu will water down, what he says. If a certain audience is watching, if the everyday person is watching, he's not going to talk about his ambitions, but he talks about his ambitions in front of the people like him all of the time. That is their goal. Their goal is that Iran would stop, and Israel doesn't care if Iran exists. They just care if Iran is going to put pressure on their country. And so what you have Egypt, which is at risk, parts of Iraq, which is at risk, and other countries around, because Israel believes that land is supposed to be theirs. So they don't care if Iran exists. They just don't want a powerful Iran, and they definitely don't want the United States of America to have a presence in the Gulf. And so if the price that America is going to pay from this war is that they have to pull out of the Middle East entirely, which is looking like it's going to be likely the case, then that's actually how Israel's dream comes true. It's not Iran isn't necessarily the problem, though a weakened Iran is for the best interest of the Israelis, but it's that the United States wouldn't be in the region at all, so they could freely go into the countries around them. Now, I would argue that the United States wouldn't even put up a fight anyways, but it is something to think about, because the United States' presence in the Middle East is major. It's super important, and it's very unpopular. I couldn't see United States involvement in the Middle East lasting 10 more years at this point, because the United States of America needs to get smart and realize that it could do much more at home, having influence over the Western Hemisphere rather than the Eastern Hemisphere, where it's just not worked out. Right? We can't get along with Russia or China. Or we could cooperate with, say, South America, cooperate with Canada and Mexico, because we have literally everything we need resource-wise on this side of the hemisphere, and we wouldn't be getting involved in any more wars. So what is it? What's it going to be? Are we going to hyperextend ourselves in this war where we're going to place troops on the ground and have this be years prolonged, with the United States economy taking a major hit, with gas prices maybe even reaching $15 a gallon? Or are we going to reevaluate ourselves and think, okay, well, what's in the best interest of the American and the American taxpayer? Because I'll tell you what, a $1.5 trillion defense budget doesn't really help the United States in its debt. As we cross $40 trillion, it was $37 trillion just a few short months ago. So this is a good time for the American to actually evaluate what they want for their country as well. Do you want the United States, which is extremely rich in its own minerals and is extremely rich in resources, do you want the United States to continue to intervene in the rest of the world, which is, we have a lifeline, right? We only have so much life left to be able to do that. Or are we going to change the way that we interact with the world and start to realize the kind of impact that we could have at home if we focus on at home. This is what Trump was literally saying 10 years ago. Why do we care about what's going on in the Middle East if we have potholes that aren't filled, if we have homeless veterans, if we have people dying of opioids on the streets, if we have a crisis of invasion coming from the southern border? Why would we care what's going on between Israel and Iran as their interests are fought over, not ours? Why do we care? Well, it's because we've been blackmailed as a country. It's because we have evil people that are in the government that control the United States of America that are pulling the strings. It's not our own government that does that. The only logical and rational explanation for what's going on in this country is that we are quite literally not the ones in charge of it, because it wouldn't make sense just logically. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that the United States acting in the United States' interests wouldn't be in this war right now. We're being gaslit into thinking that this is short-term pain for long-term gain. What's the gain? What do we gain from this? I want everybody to think about what we gain from it. How we're going to be better off after this than we were a year. I mean, like, look, even if I wanted to be extremely, extremely generous and say, you know what, it was a great thing that we obliterated their nuclear program, whatever it was, in June of 2025, which they didn't even attempt to rebuild afterwards, right? But that's not the case. The truth is that we continue to do the wrong thing, and we didn't stop there. We would have been much better off if we had stopped there. But we got lied to again, and it's going to cost us another war and billions of dollars. I think we've already spent maybe $30 plus billion on this war. So as we go to vote in the midterms and beyond, I'm not saying go all out and vote for Democrats, but what the thing that we need to start questioning is, okay, how are our congressmen, how's our president going to think about interacting with the world past this point? Are we going to have somebody that wants to be rational, thinking about the debt, think about what we have here at home, thinking about our allies or the potential allies that we could have on the Western Hemisphere? Or are we going to continue to hyperextend ourselves to the point of collapse? Just a thought. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Whether you were on Spotify, whether you're on Apple Podcasts, whether you're on YouTube, I'm so thankful that you listened to this episode all the way through. And if you did, reach out to me. Tell me what you think. I read every single Instagram DM that I get. I'm so thankful. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with a friend, 1 friend, 2 friends, 3 friends, 4 friends, red friend, blue friend. I don't even know. It helps me. And it's just been such a great last 30 days because of what you guys have done for me. And I'm so thankful. And I hope that you enjoy this episode, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.